And there's a sense in which growth in virtue is in many ways synonymous with growth in the ascetical life. As we mentioned very early on in the science of sainthood, most of us will move toward the truly mystical life only through spiritual labor. We have to till the hard soil of our hearts before the grace of God can take deep root in our lives and transform us. And development of the virtues is at the heart of this movement. If anyone loves righteousness, says Wisdom 8:7, her labors are virtues, for she teaches self-control and prudence, justice and courage. Nothing in life is more profitable for men than these. And always remember that spiritual ascent is systematic. You don't go running up a 30-foot ladder to your roof, skipping rungs and jumping from side to side, right? If you want to avoid the emergency room, you ascend in a very steady, orderly manner so that you make progress and don't fall. Now, it's the same in the spiritual life. Ascent of the divine ladder toward God isn't a willy-nilly process, nor is it always easy. So let's talk for a moment about the ascetical life. Asceticism comes from the Greek word for exercise. In other words, there's some work and sweat involved. And if you're already on your way in the spiritual life, you know this. Now that said, the slope of the spiritual mountain isn't too steep to climb. It's meant to be climbed. God didn't make it impossible. Now certainly sin has made it difficult, but God's grace is more than sufficient for us to make the ascent. And I want to reiterate this point. While it isn't overly steep, you can't ascend without grace. Without me, you can do nothing, says Christ. Many beginners in the spiritual life forget this basic principle and exhaust themselves. And it's important not to wear yourself out. The slope of the spiritual life isn't steep, but it's still a slope. Scholars like Dr. John Bergsma point out that the covenants of the Old Testament and sacred scripture all revolve around mountains. The Garden of Eden was on a mountain. The covenant with Noah took place on a mountain. God swore a covenant to Abraham on a mountain in Moriah. Moses met with God on Mount Sinai. David's covenant with God revolved around Mount Zion, the site of the Jerusalem temple. It's really fascinating. Fittingly, our spiritual growth climbs the mount of the new covenant, Mount Calvary, the mountain of self-gift and self-death exemplified by Jesus Christ. That's why St. Paul exclaims, "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." And we climb Mount Calvary by putting one foot in front of the other. It's a steady process. And while it can sometimes be difficult, realize that at the end of the day, it's actually a movement of love. Our ascent toward God is not meant to be drudgery. God is not asking us to be miserable. He's asking us to make a sacrifice of love. When you really love someone, you'll willingly sacrifice for them. You'll even give up your very life because of love. And that's the heart of our movement toward God.